So there was no imminent threat when we launched a surprise attack, which means we committed an act of perfidy. And the reason why I want to bring this up is not only did Iran not start this war, but the way this war started was, an act of infamy carried out by the United States. This president has been guilty of relying upon almost exclusively Israeli intelligence in the past. In fact, the Iranians are strategic thinkers, and they're not going to assassinate a president at the moment he just lost a war by killing the president. Now that the United States has taken this to an existential level, then Iran is saying, we're all in. They've pushed all the chips in. We don't have to steal anything. This is the reality. But the president can sell this to an American public that is dumber than dirt, and they'll buy it. And so that's what the president does. He says, I control the Strait of Hormuz because nothing can get in and out of the Strait of Hormuz without going through my steel wall. Now, that's a lie, but the American people aren't smart enough to recognize the lie. And one day we're going to wake up and we're going to be out of the Persian Gulf, gone. We're not going back to Bahrain. We're not going back to Kuwait. We're not going back to Qatar, United Arab Emirates. We're leaving.
First, we begin with, I know you have covered this on other programs, Scott, but there have been updates on the catering cart escape of Donald Trump during the NATO summit, where he took another flight and left essentially the whole White House press staff and the rest of his administration staffers on the Air Force One, which was said to be targeted by Iran, an Iranian cell inside of Turkey during the NATO summit, armed with manpads, ready to assassinate Donald Trump. Well, Turkey is now saying they suspect Israel fabricated this assassination plot to derail U.S.-Iran talks and a deal. Well, there's more to this now. The CIA today reported in the Washington Post that they had low confidence in this Iranian threat before Trump switched planes in that humiliating fashion last month, saying that this was an Israel-derived communication and plot with absolutely little reality to it. Well, in other news, this story keeps on getting worse. The USS Abraham Lincoln, the 5,000 Marines and sailors on that aircraft carrier have faced a self-harm, self-injury, and a major crisis on the ship where unrest, shortages, deteriorating conditions, endless shifts, and now a 200-plus day deployment is set to end after a brawl. According to Iran, there was a brawl on the ship after a CENTCOM advisor visited. There were water bottles thrown. There was skirmishes that led to, actually, they say 7 dead. No confirmation of that. But now, after all of this pressure and all of the talk about what's happened on the USS Abraham Lincoln in the last several days, the USS George Washington is going to replace the USS Lincoln at sea. Take about 8 days to happen. Scott, how about first start with the news about this Israeli, now it seems like, plot to hype up an assassination threat on Donald Trump. What do you make of what's happened in the last few days with this and the revelations about it? And then we can get on to the Abraham Lincoln. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is one of the most humiliating episodes in the history of an American president. The United States is supposed to be a superpower. Presidents of the United States don't travel casually. I know firsthand when, for instance, the President of the United States comes to New York City to speak at the United Nations, the security arrangements are beyond comprehension. And most of which you don't talk about. It happens, because he's the President of the United States. You have to keep this man secure. But, the U.S. intelligence community is singularly focused on detecting threats to the President of the United States. And when the President of the United States travels abroad, it's not a spur of the moment thing. We will have coordinated extraordinarily closely with our Turkish allies. Turkey has a vested interest in ensuring that the president and all other participants in a high-profile event like the NATO summit are secure in their work. We weren't born yesterday. We know the threats we're looking for. We know how they operate. We've been looking at them for a long time. And we also understand that that the president is traveling in a time of conflict and that there are, nations out there that could possibly be seeking to do harm to him. And so the idea that the president traveled to Ankara and suddenly out of the blue, a threat emerged of such gravity that the president humiliates himself in this just ridiculous, catering cart caper. It's a disgrace to leave his Secretary of State on an airplane together with staffers, White House staff, and a press pool, leaving them exposed to this threat. What kind of coward does that? It's not a matter of OPSEC either. This isn't a wartime contingency. One can make the argument, for instance, in World War II, that when in the lead up to D-Day, when we found that the Germans had broken, they were going to attack using E-boats, attack a exercise. We didn't stop it because we didn't want to let the Germans know that we had detected that we had broken their code. So we allowed the attack to take place, and hundreds of Americans lost their lives. It was determined that we were willing to pay to preserve the codes, but we weren't preserving anything. If this was a threat, there are ways that you can secure the president without this top secret stupidity. Turkey has a base near Ankara, the Murted base. We used to have American nuclear weapons stored there. We know this base inside and out. You take the president to Murted, a secure facility. Air Force One relocates, or this other aircraft relocates there. If it's too dangerous for Air Force One to fly, then you find another aircraft to come in. There's just so many different things that could have been done that were correct. That this was done shows that this was a gimmick. It was, this president has been guilty of relying almost exclusively Israeli intelligence in the past. In fact, we went to war against Iran because of Israeli intelligence. His insider, group in the White House are all pro-Israeli, sycophants. And so here what you have is a case where Israel manufactures something out of thin air, feeds it, bypasses the normal security protocols, intelligence protocols, feeds it directly to Trump's insiders who hatched this horrific plan. It was all theater designed to create the impression that the president was a wartime president, that there was great threat, that Iran is a threat to the United States, to get the United States stopped talking about peace and go into war. All it did is show once again that Israel's not our friend. I hope everybody understands that. Israel's not our friend. They're our enemy. They behave like a hostile power, feeding false information in. And the president's one of the most disgraceful, cowardly human beings on the face of the earth. No president would have approved of this. No president would have approved of it. The president can tell the Secret Service, no. Just say, no, that's not happening. Where was the chief of staff to bitch slap whoever came up with this idea and say, do you understand you're talking about the president of the United States, the office of the presidency, the commander in chief of the American military? He doesn't escape in a catering cart. He walks out with his head held high because he's the world leader. Donald Trump showed himself to be a disgraceful coward of the most despicable kind. And this is a condemnation, not just him, but it shows you the character of the people advising him. These are sneaky liars. These aren't honorable people. We'd like to believe that the people that do public service are doing it because they love their country and they want to serve their country. These are people that serve as part of a cult of personality, and they don't care about their country. They don't care about what image this sends to the world. The Lego guys in Iran, they're the most effective propaganda outlet I've seen in modern times. They're having a field day for this, an absolute field day. And their movies resonate greatly amongst the American population because they found a way to identify with the American people through Legos, sort of America. It doesn't get much more American than that, the Lego movie, but also music and the language. And so this president, once again, has just opened himself for humiliation. This is there was no threat to the president of the United States whatsoever. And he's just proven himself to be the most despicable coward imaginable. I'm ashamed of him.
Yeah. Well, here's some of that footage of some of the videos that have been circulating from explosive media about this incident. Which, I mean, Scott, even let's say 100% everything Israel was saying was true. The very information that we're being reported on in the Western mainstream media about what Israel said is quite interesting, because they said a cell inside of Turkey armed with man-pads was solely prepared to strike the Air Force One, which the scandal was it doesn't have any of the fixtures needed to protect from any kind of strike or targeting of that plane. But the fact is that Iran, I was reading Ynet recently, and the Israelis were complaining about how there's infiltration all up and down the Israeli Defense Forces from Iran. They found all kinds of willing participants to do this. Why wouldn't Iran think that this could also be a scenario where he would try to escape on a decoy? It's so ridiculous to think that this was to get fed that information and then buy into it and go through this whole song and dance, which only makes you look really stupid, and it's really humiliating, to say the least. Your comments on this before moving on.
Well, the other thing we have to understand is the Iranians, what's happening here is a lot of projection. And the United States is guilty of this, and Israel knows this, so they exploit it. We tend to project onto our opponents our behaviors. We're the ones who assassinate world leaders. We're the ones who, use assassination as a tool of diplomacy. We undermine negotiations by assassinating people. And so, having conditioned the American public to the normalcy of assassination as a matter of public policy, the American public is likely to believe when we project our behaviors onto others whom we deem to be of an evil character, like the Iranians. We say that the Iranians are positioning themselves to assassinate the president of the United States while he's in Turkey. But nobody ever had stepped back and said, why would they do that, especially at this time? Iran just won the war. I mean, when the president showed up in Ankara, the war was over. We lost. We ran out of ammunition. We ran out of, we have no ability to project our, military power meaningfully into the region. We can't seize the Strait of Hormuz. We can't seize Karg Island. We can't seize Isfahan. We can't do anything. Except the longer this war dragged on, the more Iran was able to damage us with ballistic missiles that we couldn't stop. So Iran, having won the war, was now in a position of trying to negotiate the best conflict termination event possible. Understand that is the priority of Iran. They're not going to surrender their sovereignty. They're not going to, give in to the United States, but they don't want this war to continue. They're looking to bring this war to an end. That's their strategic goal and objective. So why kill Trump? It makes no sense. Now, people say, of course, Iran's threatened to because the United States helped Israel kill the supreme leader, and Trump assassinated Qasem Soleimani, and the Iranians have pledged revenge. But there's a time and a place. The Iranians are strategic thinkers, and they're not going to assassinate a president at the moment he just lost a war. By killing the president, what you guarantee is America will rally around the martyrdom of an American president and bring the wrath of America down on Iran. The last thing Iran wants is America to strategically shift the totality of its capacity to the destruction of Iran, which we would do if they killed our president. And the Iranians know this. So right off the bat, there has to be an intelligence officer inside the inner circle that says, this doesn't make any sense. This is really, really stupid. And where does the intelligence come from? Let's look at it. Let's parse it out. But that wasn't allowed to happen because Israel was the source of this. And Israel went straight to the president's inner circle who cocked up this disparity. No real intelligence officer worth their salt would have said this assassination plot makes sense. It doesn't make any sense. And therefore, you have to dig deeper into the source of the intelligence. And now that it's coming from Israel, you have to demand, this is a threat against the life of the president. You demand access to the primary intelligence information. I want the SIGINT hit. I want to know everything about it, how you collect it, what frequency, where were these people at, what's going on? You got a human source? Give me the damn name. This is my president. And I'll bitch slap you into oblivion if you don't respond, because you're talking about the security of the commander in chief of the United States. It's not a game anymore. And that we treated it like a game, a stupid game, a game of hide and seek. It's humiliating. This is stupid. I'm just here to tell you that real intelligence professionals, real security professionals would never have allowed this to happen. And you can bring them in, bring in the Secret Service. They'll tell you the same thing. Real Secret Service officers. What a horse of crap load of garbage this was. I mean, because you actually made the president less secure, because you're violating all sorts of protocols, for what? Put him in a cart so he can get on another airplane. What happened to the other threats? I mean, was this, a C-38J suddenly, not vulnerable to Iranian manpads? What the hell was going on? This is it's a horrible thing, humiliating for the United States. It shows we're an amateur country. Literally, we're a banana republic.
Well, in the other news, Scott, that I know is dear to your heart, which is the condition of those who have been forced to spend 9+ months out toward the Indian Ocean, just outside of the Persian Gulf, because of this ongoing permanent blockade, which Pete Hegseth said is going to go on as long as it takes. Now the USS Lincoln, the crisis aboard, where those 5,000 Marines and sailors are going through such a crisis that several have tried to take their own lives. Now it's being replaced by the USS George Washington, almost seemingly to repeat this process all over again. So what have been your thoughts on this crisis? Iran went so far as to say there was a big skirmish, a big brawl on the ship that led to deaths, unverified for now. But your thoughts on what's been going on in the USS Lincoln and U.S. Navy in general?
Well, we don't know if any of these stories are true, so we have to be careful about this. It's in Iran's interest to put emphasis on things that make the United States and the United States Navy look bad. There's a lot of information warfare going on right now, and what it would be in Iran's benefit to get the United States public enraged over the extended deployment of the Abraham Lincoln and the horrific state of affairs on board for the crew. If I were the Iranians, I'd want to promote this kind of story. So we have to take a step back and be careful on the sourcing of this data. But what we do know is this: we are not in a state of war. No war has been declared. Fact is, according to President Trump, we're not even in a military operation anymore. That ended. So here we have to look at what the U.S. military has become in recent decades. We're not the expeditionary fighting force that we used to be. When I joined the Marine Corps, the junior Marines weren't allowed to be married. I think you had to wait till you were like a sergeant. If you want to get married before sergeant, you had to get permission. You had to go and talk, because Marines belong in the barracks, and Marines trained hard, and there was no time for a wife. There was no time for families. Marines lived in open bay squad bays and Quonset huts, not the glorified little hotels that they live in today called, their barracks, squad bays. This was hardcore. The Fleet Marine Force was no joke. But when you deployed hard. You were going on a 6-month pop, and you knew it. And you also knew that the contingencies could arise that extended that, and you were ready for it. You actually prayed for it. You prayed for war every day, every morning. Marines woke up and prayed for war because that's what they were training for. Today, everybody's married. I'm not against the institution of marriage, but understand that that's not conducive to a professional fighting force because now people have priorities that aren't learning to close with and kill the enemy. Priorities like, I got to get my kids to school on time. I need more money, so I have a second job. I got to go work at Home Depot doing the night shift once I finish doing my Marine thing during the day. I'm sorry, when you join the U.S. military, you're a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman, or Guardian, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't get a second job. But today they do. They all do. And commanders tolerate this. Because, of course, you have to take care of your people. And when we deploy now, there's a timeline. We talk about it. We say, okay, what are you going to do about your schooling? When I was a kid, my dad was career Air Force. We moved when we moved. I left in the middle of a school year every single time I went to school. I mean, I'd start a school year and next year the government says, you're out of there. Bam, gone. They don't care. They don't care about my friends. They don't care that I'm in a school play or I'm playing football or anything. You're gone. Unplug, go plug in. And you just did it. And every 2 years. And we didn't move in the summer. We moved in the middle of the frickin' school year every single time. That's just the way it was. But today, everything has to be balanced. Families relocate. They get, things are done. Vacations are planned on when you're coming home. All this kind of stuff. All these plans are made that are centered around family life and around the emotional well-being of the service member and his or her family. And then when war comes, everybody's shocked when people are like, wait a minute, this is very disruptive of my life. Well, no kidding. Of course it is. But this is a leadership failure because you didn't prepare your sailors for this eventuality. That you didn't prepare them for their families. And when this happened, you didn't have the leadership programs in place to brief your sailors effectively. And they're saying that there's shortages of food. What kind of leader lets these shortages happen? Again, we're not talking about a nuclear war where there's no milk and everything's gone and you got to, take your own urine and, boil it up to get water and all that. No. This is the United States of America. All right. If you're the commander of an aircraft carrier and you're out of milk, you get on the phone and you say, give me some goddamn milk now. I don't care what it costs you. Put it on a frickin' airplane and fly it out here. I want milk for breakfast tomorrow because the morale of my sailors depends upon it. These are the guys. Remember, aircraft carriers, they're cities. And the work they do, you don't want people screwing up. This is why you take care of your sailors on board. You keep them. You got to get that mindset focused on the mission. So, you feed them well. We always fed our troops well, always on a ship. The sailors ate good. And you don't run out of food. There's no excuse for this. There's zero excuse for this. And the Navy knows this. The Navy knows we've been supplying food to ships for forever. So this is just an abysmal leadership failure. And, this happens when you have a Secretary of Defense that has lost control of the department that he's responsible for overseeing. He spends more time running with idiots, bench pressing, and doing things like this instead of sitting down and making sure that the basics are done first. Every military leader knows, bullets, bandage, and beans. Beans. You feed your freaking troops on time, on target. There's no excuse for this. This isn't war. The Japanese didn't sink your resupply ship. And if they did, you still have a backup plan out there, where the destroyers bring on the provisions and come up and then you cross-load them. Whatever you have to do. But this can't happen. You can't have discipline like this falling apart on a ship. This means that the Navy's lost control of the Navy. Because, again, the military isn't meant to be, a convenient lifestyle, 9-to-5 job. You join the military because you're prepared to go to war, and war is hell on earth. You don't get to sit there and bitch and moan. War is about dying for your country, which is a hell of a lot worse than not getting cold milk for breakfast. But so you got to be hard. You got to be willing to drink water and eat bread if that's what's needed. You got to be willing to gap a meal. Marines were on Guadalcanal when the Navy sailed away because the Japanese were putting too much pressure, and the Marines were abandoned on Guadalcanal. Did they sit down and bitch and moan and cry and surrender and wail? No, they dug in and they fought until the Navy decided to come back and get them supplies. This military is just soft as hell. Soft as hell. I don't have any sympathy for the sailors on the Abraham Lincoln. None whatsoever. Yes, they have a leadership failure, but you know what? Be a professional. Be a professional. You signed up for this. This is what when that raised that hand, this is what you said you wanted to do. And now it got real. And what, you're complaining because you've been to sea? World War II, those guys were out there all the time. They didn't get to go home. But the fault, again, is the system. The system softened these sailors up. And this is just a horrific lack of discipline across the board. This ship should be brought back to port, and everybody should be subjected to review. And if there's a leadership failure from the captain or admiral in charge all the way down, they should be relieved from the military. This isn't how we win wars. This is how we lose wars. This has to be a lesson. I know that's probably not the answer people want to hear. They want to hear me talk about the sympathy for the poor sailors. No way. None. You signed up. You took the oath. It's a volunteer military. You knew what you were getting into. So I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. It's another disgraceful act. I don't believe they should be there. I don't agree with what they're doing. I don't agree with the mission, but that's no excuse. You're in the damn Navy. Do your damn job and quit bitching and moaning about it.
Right. No, I mean, it is certainly the reality, as you said, Scott. That's how the system actually works. And I guess I'm curious then, because what does this say then about, you said, you don't agree with the mission, why they're there in the first place. What does it say about that? Because it seems like you said that there's this contradiction between, not being at war, but yet being permanently deployed and the conditions are getting worse and worse. And yet there is no war footing, but there is a blockade, and Iran sees the blockade as a war. And that's why they're there, right? They're there to enforce the blockade. So I guess my question is then, what does this say about overall the U.S.'s military posture? Because now Iran is saying they're going on the offensive. They're going to wait this out until 2029. They don't have any problems with the U.S. continuing to pretend like it's at war or not at war, or any of this. But it seems like it's having a really big effect on the morale of the U.S. Military forces, Navy, etc. So your thoughts on this?
Well, now we get a different Scott Ritter, okay? Because now you asked me a different question altogether. Why do you serve? What motivates you to serve? I can straight up tell you that I volunteered to serve. I enlisted in the summer of 1979 because I truly believed that the Soviet Union was an evil force. I lived in West Germany. The Soviets were over there in East Germany, and I truly believed they were wanting to come over and end democracy as we knew it. And I was serving to defend my country, defend my way of life, to defend democracy. And I truly believed it. I mean, now that I'm a little bit older and studied history a little bit more, I realize it was all a crock of shit. But at the time, I truly believed it. And I joined ready to die for my cause. I believed in it 100%. And later, as I transitioned to the Marine Corps, I continued to have this belief system that we were on the side of good. Now, you begin to see things and realize that not everything's perfect, but you believe overall I'm in service of good, of justice, of righteousness. And you let it balance it out. Today, what good are we doing? What are we serving today? If you wanted to join, I've always struggled with this because I've had people come up and say, Scott, my son, my daughter wants to join the Marine Corps. Would you advise that? And I would say, they got to have a long, hard conversation with themselves, understanding that you give an oath to the Constitution, that you serve the nation, not the president, but you have to obey the president's orders. You can't join the military because you're happy with the president you have, because in 4 years, while you're still in, you might get a president that you don't support. And you have to be willing to obey those orders from that president, because that president is the commander in chief. So you have to be honest with why you're joining, what service you're providing, what you believe in. Is this a cause worthy of your life? And if it's about economics. I'm doing this for the money. You're making the wrong damn choice, because believe me, your paycheck doesn't matter a hoot when you're, getting off a helicopter and rounds are zinging through, your buddy's brain just blew out on your chest, and you're sitting there watching another guy bleed out. And you're saying, that combat pays pretty good. No, no. Now you're into a whole different environment. Why are you there? What are you doing? I just had I wrote an article about a statement made by a German journalist, Michael Martens, when he talked about killing Russians. And, in the article, my response, I brought up David Grossman's book on killing, which talks about, because let's just be straight up, guys. War is about killing. It's not about anything else. War is about man killing man. That's why it's the worst thing in the world. That's why you should never want war. It's humankind acting at its basest moment. It's the ugly. It just makes mankind ugly as hell. And what Grossman said is, and this is sort of the good news, the vast majority of soldiers in World War II didn't fire their weapon. And then when they did, many of them didn't aim. Why? Because they didn't want to kill. Killing's hard, and that's good. You should make killing hard. But today we made killing easy. We've changed up our training. We've done, but the end result of making killing easy is that understand that when we make people kill, they're broken for life, and then they come back and it's done. This is all the reality of going to war. So I keep telling them that you understand that if you join the Marine Corps and you go to war and you kill, you're never going to be the same. And the parents need to understand that little Johnny will never be the same. That doesn't mean little Johnny's broken forever, but little Johnny will never be the same. Little Johnny is going to have some bad shit happen in his brain, and it's going to affect him for life. And he may become an alcoholic. He may become a wife beater. He may become a drug addict. He may become a criminal. It's going to break him. Little Johnny went up marching off. He's not coming home. But even then, sometimes you have to say, okay, that's the price I'm willing to pay for the greater good. I'm defending the greater good. What greater good are you defending today? And this is the question. And the answer is there is no greater good in America today. The oath you take, the oath of service, is to the Constitution. But right now, if the American people can't tell me what the damn Constitution is, that means we aren't a constitutional republic. Because we can only be a constitutional republic if we, the people of the United States of America, have read the Constitution, absorbed the Constitution, lived the Constitution, hold others accountable to the Constitution. Then we're a constitutional republic. The vast majority of American citizens couldn't take a test on the Constitution today and pass it. They couldn't pass the citizenship test. So if you become a citizen, you take a test. I think the passing grade is 100%. And if you fail, you don't become a citizen. Well, imagine if every year, every American citizen had to take a citizenship test. We wouldn't have any American citizens. So right off the bat, the people joining the military today are serving what? Not a damn thing. Because this isn't the United States of America. This is something else. This is a diseased society that has been taken hostage by a cult of personality that has said straight up he doesn't believe in the Constitution. And we have a Congress that isn't doing a damn thing about it. We have a judiciary that's basically said the president can do anything he wants in office and it's not a crime. And so the president is doing everything in office that is a crime, like fluctuating the market and insider trading, making billions of dollars. This is what you would be dying for if you joined the military today. So my answer today to anybody saying, would you advise anybody to join the military? I say, hell no. Hell no. This isn't a country we're dying for today. It's not. And until we fix this country, and that needs to be our number one priority, I wouldn't advise dying for this country. And I would advise everybody on the Abraham Lincoln, the George Washington, every ship out there that when your enlistment expires, get the hell out. And I would advise everybody thinking about joining this military to think long and hard and don't. Because all you're going to be doing is servicing a broken society. It's not the job of the military to save America. It's the job of the citizens to save America. And when we, the people of the United States of America, get our act together and fix this thing and make a society worth defending, then I'll say join and serve. But right now, I wouldn't die for this country. Not for this country. This country's broken.
Yeah, well said, Scott. Then your thoughts on now Iran's particular posture, how they have been reacting. Iran, I believe it was Arachi who said, they didn't really have any plans to assassinate Donald Trump because Trump is already killing the United States. That's he said there was no almost like the do nothing and win
Trump's the best
mentality.
weapon that Iran has. You know,
Right.
just let him be Trump.
So your thoughts on Iran's posture right now? Because they're saying they're just going to keep going, that they haven't met their ultimate objective anyway. They're not even talking about any kind of MOU talks, anything like this. Things have really, and this is now reflected in the oil prices. We see those either staying steady or ticking up and up and up. And not to mention the fact that perhaps, as you said, broken society, broken military. You have also in the United States, every single month, more and more people have disdain for this war, don't think it's worth fighting, that there are no objectives that the United States is actually going to meet in it. So your thoughts on Iran's position given these factors on the ground?
Well, first of all, we just be, again, honest. Iran didn't start this war. And if you want to get into it, Iran was actually doing everything possible to avoid this war. You know, Donald Trump had articulated Iran's nuclear program as being a threat worthy of war. But at the time, see, in order for a threat to be imminent, it means that no steps can be taken to remove the risk of conflict, the threat. But we were actually actively negotiating with the Iranians. And indeed, on February 27th, we had a deal that was in the hands of the Omani foreign minister, who was flying to the United States to finalize the deal, which would have resolved all of the outstanding issues regarding Iran's nuclear program, which Trump said represented the existential threat worthy of war. So there was no imminent threat when we launched a surprise attack, which means we committed an act of perfidy. And the reason why I want to bring this up is not only did Iran not start this war, but the way this war started was, an act of infamy carried out by the United States. Again, look at the history of the United States. December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, according to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The Japanese launched a surprise attack against the American fleet in Pearl Harbor. A surprise attack. And we called it an act of cowardice. It is. And the same thing when they attacked us in the Philippines and elsewhere. We did this now. Here we are, a nation that was raised. I was raised with the notion that what the Japanese did on December 11th or December 7th was a horrible thing. I lived in Hawaii. I went to the Pearl Harbor Memorial, and it resonates with me. And so now my country has become that which we have condemned, despised. We are a nation that carries out surprise attacks, using diplomacy as a cover, act of perfidy. And so the reason why I bring this up is that, Iran is the wronged party, the aggrieved party here. The good news for Iran is that they sort of knew this was coming. They expected this, and they had prepared for it. And they were better prepared for war than we were, the United States. And Iran prevailed in this conflict. The Iranian position now is that that this has to end now. This can't be something that is sustainable. They can't allow a repetition where the United States simply comes back in 5 years and bombs the next supreme leader and kills them and rolls in with a bombing campaign. Iran is saying this is over now. Now that the United States has taken this to an existential level, then Iran is saying, we're all in. They've pushed all the chips in. We're all in. Trump can sit there and go, call, pass, fold. Iran's all in. That's it. This is the only hand that's going to be played, and Iran's holding, a straight flush. Ace high. So it's over. They're going to ride this thing out. Now they're not going to commit suicide. They're not stupid. As we sort of joke, but it's the truth. The best weapon Iran has is Donald Trump, which is why Iran just said, we're not going to talk to Donald Trump. We're going to let this weapon of mass destruction loose on the people of the United States for 2 more years and on the world for 2 more years. And we're just going to sit back and say, screw you, do what you need to do. We're done. We're not playing this game anymore. Because the problem is the United States. Iran needs the United States out of the Middle East. The United States is a cancer in the Middle East, or it's, a subset of the greater cancer, which is Israel. But Iran wants the United States out and is not going to accept anything other than that. And Iran's holding all the cards, which is why we have a situation today where the president is desperately looking for an off-ramp. This whole thing about the steel wall that he talks about, the blockade, there is no steel wall. Understand that. People, please look at a map of the Arabian Sea. And imagine 16 ships on picket duty. What's their span of control? Even if you give them helicopters doing patrolling and you have other airplanes, how can 16 ships represent a steel wall? They can't.